Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Lieutenant Colonel Deborah Warren-Smith. We are honoured to acknowledge Major General John Boswell, Chief of Army, New Zealand, Lieutenant General Rick Burr, Chief of Army, Australia, Warrant Officer Grant McFarlane, Regimental Sergeant Major of the Australian Army, and Warrant Officer Clive Douglas, New Zealand Army. We're also honoured to acknowledge Director General Weng Zhonglu, Taiwan Ministry of Justice, Investigation Bureau, and the accompanying delegation. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors and students on behalf of the following schools. From New South Wales, St George Christian School, Secondary Department, Hurstville. From Queensland, Emerald Christian College. And from South Australia, Balaclava High School. Please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Students, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the hearts of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Corporal Herbert Thomas Joseph Sinclair. Herbert Sinclair, known as Bert, was born in 1895 to James and Annie Sinclair of Sydney. At some point he moved to Ipswich in Queensland, where his uncle Hugh was the manager of the Queensland Farmers Cooperative Company factory. There he worked as a carpenter. Bert Sinclair was among the first to enlist in the Australian Imperial Force following the outbreak of war in 1914. He was posted to the 9th Battalion and after a period of training in Australia, left for active service overseas. On the 25th of April 1915, the 9th Battalion was part of the covering force for the landing at Anzac Cove and was among the first to land under heavy rifle fire. The 9th Battalion's war diary notes that the men displayed great bravery and held on tenaciously in the face of staunch enemy opposition to the landing. Private Sinclair performed so well at the landing that 3 days later he was promoted to Lance Corporal. On the 21st of May, he received a gunshot wound to the neck and spent some weeks in Egypt recovering. He returned to his battalion on the peninsula in June, and 3 days later, he was shot in the shoulder. This second wound was less serious, and he recovered without an extended period of hospitalisation. 2 weeks later, he was promoted to corporal. Sinclair had a number of close mates in his platoon, including Corporal Tom Scrivener, who had a dugout near his own. Scrivener later wrote a letter describing what happened on the 24th of September 1915. Bert came around to my dugout to ask me the time, as he was in charge of a working party at 1 o'clock. He had just sat down when all of a sudden a big shell burst in my dugout. It took us by surprise, and after the smoke, dust and fumes had cleared away, I found I was all right, and the old fellow that camps with me was all right too. I looked around, and there was Bert almost buried in the dirt. He said to me, "Am I hit, Tom?" I looked and found he was hit, 8 pellets in the back. We got the doctor and stretchers at once, and the old fellow, my mate, carried him out of the dugout in case any more shells would come that way. As Corporal Sinclair was being carried out of the dugout, he asked Tom, "Am I hit badly?" Scrivener replied that no, he was all right. And that was the last thing Bert Sinclair heard. Shortly afterwards, he lapsed into unconsciousness and died not long after. That evening, all the men of No. 7 Platoon of the 9th Battalion attended a brief burial service in Shell Green Cemetery. Scrivener had a cross erected for the man he described as my pal since we joined, and the 9th Platoon, and the 7th Platoon did all they could to commemorate their friend appropriately. Tom Scrivener wrote to Bert's parents to say, "I might say he was a soldier and feared nothing. Every man in the company liked him. It's hard, but still, he died fighting for liberty, king and country." Corporal Bert Sinclair was 20 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Corporal Herbert Thomas Joseph Sinclair, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We'll remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. Thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial, and we wish you all a very good evening.